not planning on having anything else to do with the film industry, and then Dennis Lisenby wrangled me into UVU's film program, and then friends and I started a production company. And so I'm just excited to begin associating with people in the film industry in Utah, because my background's all Hollywood. So it's great to meet you all and hear what you're doing, and now I need to process it and find out how my company can tie into everybody else.
Okay, good. Let me introduce her a little bit. And Dennis Lisenby, you may want to add a comment or two or whatever, just as an introduction. I'll be pretty brief here, but real quickly, here's the need and then the solution. The need is that filmmakers, unlike a writer who can sit down with a word processor and put out a great American novel, a filmmaker kind of needs some other resources. And that means other people involved, that means costs and all of that. So there's needing to have some funding there. And also we need distribution. And so it's one thing to make a great film, it's another thing to get it distributed. And so in order to bring about the solution to those needs, there needs to be a manner of persuading, well, first of all, being in touch with the audience. Will this be profitable? And second, in touch with distributors, is it because it will be profitable, is it something they would want to contract as distribution on? Well, how do you persuade them to do that? This is what this is all about. And so Traci comes from having worked at Warner Brothers and then also at Disney as a senior executive there with, and then at Miramax as well. And it was 2001, I think you were saying.
We started working on this, yeah.
Yeah, that she was asked by her boss, Harvey Weinstein, to say, well, how much, he asked her, how much will this film make, as she's pitching ideas or film scripts to him, and how much will this make? Well, how do you quantify something like that? So she and her associate, you mentioned Dana. And she'll go into the details on this, but they developed the greenlight process, which is now the industry standard. We want to know this.
And I didn't get a dime for it.
Dang. So
that sucks. You know?
we want to know this. There's one other angle I want you to think about, all of you here. We are creators, and I say that because somebody was asking, well, what do you do for a living? And my answer was, I create worlds. That's what I do. I create worlds. You know, the world of this film, the world of that film. And we create. And so as creators, and I'm saying this as a mindset, we need to be in touch in terms of the business aspect of all of these things. And that is right and proper. We have all of this. But there's another angle I'm asking all of you to think about on this. And that is, and in fact, let me introduce it this way. I remember going through writing a screenplay and thinking, well, now what about high concept or some other things like that? And it ended up in my definition of that, and that's a fairly narrow definition, it ended up spurring some other thoughts for other scenes and other ways to handle some of the character development elements. And so I'm wondering if there are some things that, as writers, might come out of understanding the greenlight process here that would affect the writing, meaning in a very, very positive way to say, wow, let's do this in such a way that there will be a larger audience, that will reach more people and reach them on a deeper level. Now, Helene has done that really well in several things with Rattlesnake Road, where she has expressed, because of this, I put this scene in here. And I think there's a lot of merit to that. So keep that in mind as we hear now from Traci. So the time is yours, please.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the invitation. I come to you from the Hollywood perspective, okay? What I teach at UVU is how we do it in Hollywood. And so the first document that you have there, the one-sheet document on the motion picture development production schedule, I was a senior vice president at Miramax, and Thursday mornings were pitch mornings. And literally you wanted to pop about 8 Imodium MD before you went into them. And there'd be Harvey, Brad, who was head of production, Lori, who was head of marketing, myself, who was head of production resources, and I can't remember the guy's name who was head of finance. And we would sit in this room, and Harvey would sit there with his leg, and he'd bounce his leg and his foot, and he'd look at his foot the whole time. drove me nuts. And people would come in one at a time and pitch ideas. And Harvey always asked us 4 questions. While you're sitting there having just pitched the most incredible script that has ever been written in the history of scripts, and you've got blood, sweat, and tears in your entire future aligned to that script, and Harvey would listen to you pitch this, and then he'd look at us and he'd go, the first question was, how much money is this going to make me? Well, how do I know? I just heard it for the first time as well, you know? So we'd come up with something that sounded palatable, and then if the answer to that was it wasn't enough to have an ROI, a return on investment, then he would say, well, can you market it to a campaign? Can we make this film and win Golden Globes and Oscars with it? And at the time, Miramax had more Oscars than anybody. And so we'd look at each other and maybe, but probably not.
Is that like the Flex One model?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So then he would ask us the third question, and he'd ask the finance guy, do we need a tax write-off? Meaning, let's make this film knowing we're all going to lose money on it, but we can use it as a tax write-off. And if he would say, no, we don't need that large a tax write-off, and we're okay right now, then the fourth question was, should we option this film so nobody else does? Meaning, we don't want to make it, but we don't want anybody else to make it because it will compete with some of our box office. And after going through this for about a year, Harvey, challenged us. John Lee had begun creating this process, and I had learned it from him. And I made the mistake of making some comment that we are the only industry in the history of the world that does not do market research before we make a product and put it out in the marketplace. We are spending millions of dollars because I just love this script, and if we make it, they will come, and then they don't. And now we're in debt, $5 million, what do we do? And I made the mistake of saying, a friend of mine began developing this market research process. And Harvey, for all of his faults, and they are multitudinous, he understood business. And so he looked at myself and he said, see if you can develop this process so that we know when we greenlight a film, we're going to make money. Because with Harvey, it was all about how much money it was going to make. So Dana and I took about 3 years of mistakes and whatnot to create this process. And when we ended this, when you end the internal and external greenlight analysis, you know your target audience, you know how you're going to market, you know estimate-wise how much money you're going to make in the U.S. box office with all 4 of its distribution windows, and how much you're going to make in the foreign box offices as well out of the 14 big territories. And so, and when you get to those ancillary markets, if you're doing this correctly, your profit is going from millions to sometimes hundreds of millions. Because as balanced producers, you prepare the worldwide marketplace for your film, and you prepare your film for the worldwide marketplace. And we would be able to turn these reports back into Harvey and say, these are the estimates, these are the assumptions. And then Harvey could go from there. And Harvey usually wanted an ROI that was a 4-to-1 ratio. Occasionally he'd go down to a 3-to-1 ratio on profit. But we were surprisingly accurate, which really startled me. We really finished this, and Dana and I looked at each other and went, damn, this works. I had no idea. So the first thing that we did was we said, okay, number one, all of this stuff has to be done in development. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to waste time in development. We don't want to make a film. That's what's fun. And I freely admit that's the fun part of the process. But 9 out of 10 films that fail because you didn't do this process in development. By the time you begin pre-production, all of your worldwide distribution is already contractually in place. And because of the aggregate of that collateral, the bank funds your production, not you. So to begin with, you've got in development, okay, your story option and your acquisition. That takes anywhere from, about a month. And then you've got script writing, original drafts, rewrites, polishes. That is the first 8 to 12 months in development. And those of you who are writers know why. Mm-hmm. And why you want to be a writer always escapes me. Right, so then for the next year, you're concentrating on director and lead talent attachment. Let's see, let me see if I can get this to go down. There we go. This way, okay. You've got director and lead talent attachment, physical production prep, location, site, all that other stuff. You've got your budget, you've got your schedule, you've got your production design, visual sound effects. All of this is being developed in production. In addition, you've got your finance sales plan, your marketing materials, your versions, your global distribution meetings and collaborative relationships, pre-sales, completion bond, E&O bond, your production insurance, your production bank loan memorandum, your PPM. All of this is done in the first 18 to 24 months in development. Now, the one thing I usually get, particularly from small filmmakers, is I don't want to waste 2 years. It takes 2 years to do it right. I'm sorry. And so you want to do all of this prep. And then your pre-production and your production and your post and your getting it to the distributor and marketing is an additional year. So from the concept of your script to beginning to see your U.S. box office and return on investment is approximately 2.5 to 3 years. And a lot of filmmakers don't like to hear that. But if you do it that way, you're guaranteed there's absolutely no guarantee you're not going to lose money because this is the film industry. But you're sitting much more securely on your project. So what we determined on this greenlight analysis, this is an analysis that my production company did for a script called Inauguration. It's an action adventure. It's a $40 million budget. And so we did this. And this information, this packet of information I gave you, we sent to Tom Hiddleston's agent in London. He received it on Tuesday. I got an email on Wednesday saying, this is amazing information. Oh my gosh, can we, where do I send the NDA? This is on Tom's desk. By the way, great script. What really impressed him was the financial preparation that said, we're not going to lose money on this film. By Friday, we had a formal offer out to Tom Hiddleston. Tom is attached as both lead actor and producer. And then COVID hit and everything went down a headbasket. So, we're waiting on that. Yes, sir. If you have questions, please ask.
Yeah.
Please.
So much of the development seems to be hinged on having the script. How do you do all of that?
All of that is optioning the script. That can take a while. Or if you have to buy literary rights, tracing down who has the literary rights. Mm-hmm. And on literary rights, guys, when you're optioning a script, you want to make sure you have the rights to every kind of entertainment of that script, including, this is how we were able to do Girl Who Hung the Moon last year. Fox has the rights to that book. They don't have live theatrical rights to it. Which really surprised me because I know the head of legal at Fox, and I don't know why he didn't include that. So we contacted Fox, and as long as we didn't record it, there wasn't anything they could do. So you want to make sure that you have the literary rights. And that's tracking down your publisher, tracking down the author. We have literary rights to it. We have theatrical rights to a book called Only Alien on the Planet. Pulitzer Prize-winning book about coming-of-age bullying. We contacted the publisher, we contacted the agent, we purchased the rights to that, optioned it for 3 years, and then Liz, one of my business partners, adapted the script. So it's a matter of, if it's somebody else's script, contacting their agent or contacting them directly and negotiating the price. In Hollywood, an option can cost you anywhere from $100,000 to $300,000.
Right.
Yes, sir?
Do you have the option, after the 3 years, do you have the rights to, or the opportunity to
re-option, to reconnect,
the option?
Yeah.
And
You always want that.
Right.
So, getting that story, and as Peter Gruber once said, the real success is that emotional connection of the story. That's why we do, test groups. Mm-hmm. We're videotaping the audience to see if they laugh, to see if they cry, to see if they're emotionally connected. And so we do that. We all are in this insane industry for one reason and one reason only. We want to tell stories that emotionally touch people and change their lives. That's it. Boom. That's what we want to do. So it all comes back to the story.
Right.
And the worst place to be is to have a really good story and no money. And we can all relate to that. So the process of the green light begins with you've got the script.
Okay.
Now the first thing you have to do is you have to write a synopsis, a 1 to 2 page synopsis of the script. I can't tell you how many pitches I sat in that after 20 minutes I still couldn't tell you what the story was about. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were all over everything, and I kept thinking, yeah, but what's the story? So doing that synopsis enables you to, I know my storyline. Write a log line on that storyline because that's the beginning of your pitch. Then write a tagline, which is, that simple sentence on your one sheet that tells me what that film's about. I mean, we have one script that I'm going to give to my class next year. My class does all my work for me. It's great. That is called High Road, and the tagline is, he's the bronze, she's the brain, together can they get the kid out?
Together they what?
Can they get the kid out?
Oh.
Took us almost 3 weeks to write that damn thing. So, it was, you've got that, but that's the beginning of your pitch. And so also writing that enables you to see, do I really know what I'm doing? Is there a hole in the story? Who's the antagonist? Who's the protagonist? Mm-hmm. Who is telling the story? Whose story it is? And it's amazing how many scripts, as somebody said, as Dennis said, it's a great idea, but they had no idea how to write this. Whose story are you telling? Who's the protagonist? Who's the antagonist? What's the change? Instead you get, this is Harry Potter meets Star Trek. Well, I hated Star Trek, and Harry Potter was boring. You just lost me. And it doesn't tell me what the story is. So once you write that synopsis, then what you do is you take that script. This was the hardest part. I'm not a writer, I will freely admit. I suck at writing. But I'm really good at coming to you and going, there's a real problem in Act 3. You've got to find a way to tie this together. And inevitably the script doctors would go, well, what should I do? I don't know. I'm not the writer. You are. Fix it. So you write a 2-minute commercial based on the script. And you've all seen commercials. I mean, literally, it's you lift this line out, you lift this line out. Now you've got, So you write that 2-minute commercial. And the real good thing about writing this campaign is it really shows you where the problems with the script are. That's where so many times I would go, I can't write a commercial off your script. There's a problem in the arc between Act 2 and Act 3. Go fix it. And the script doctors hated my phone calls. But, it really helped find the holes in the script and the holes in the story.
See, that's what I was getting at when I did the introduction about mindset here. That was the very process I was in that flushed out some things and created some new scenes.
Because from this point on, your main thought, I don't care how creative you are as a writer, director, or editor, your main thought is, who's my target audience? How do I market to them? Mm-hmm. Period. Period, paragraph, end of discussion. That's the whole focus of this. Because if you make a great film and nobody sees it, what's the point? So, who is your target audience? Then once you've taken that script, that campaign, now you are going to go through an audience analysis. And these are all proprietary formulas. This is what took us 3 years of working out these proprietary formulas. And we would go through, and every time there was a beat in that campaign, in that commercial we wrote, with, we had to do a little 5-stick then, how many beats of romance were in it. And then we'd go back and we'd read the campaign, how many beats of drama were in there, how many beats of comedy, How many beats of action adventure? We used risque, we mean sex, okay? How many set? And it's different from romance, you all know that. Science fiction, fantasy, horror, and we would mark those beats. And the two top percentages would tell us, like this is only alien on the planet. No romance, 48 beats, 22 beats of drama, 3 beats of comedy, 8 beats of action adventure, no sex, no science fiction, no horror. So that tells us that if the drama, it's, what do we have, 17%. All right, it's a drama and an action adventure. Well, I didn't think it was that when I read the book. But that was the campaign, that was the commercial we wrote from the script, which was adapted from the book. All right, so now we know our genre. But now we had to go through because what it skewed out to, if you look over here on the side, was older women. This is a teenage story, coming of age. Wait a minute, okay. So now we have to factor in culture. We've got kids, youth, young adults, women, men, and seniors. So now we go through and we say, okay, let's say there are 22 beats. We've got 28 beats of kids. We've got 13 beats of youth, 1 beat of young adults, 1 beat of women, no men, no seniors. Now we look over here where we've got seniors, women, men, youth, kids, yada, 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 yada. We look at the profile and our target audience now becomes kids 5 to 7, women 18 above. Now we can look at those, and I just made those up. Now I can look at that and go, my target audience is youth and mothers. Okay, that's who we're going to market it to. But how is it going to do in the marketplace? So what you do on all these other sections that we have here is now start thinking about films that had stories that were geared to youth and mothers in the past 7 to 8 years. You don't want to go past that because every 7 years you have a new target audience. Kids become tweens, teens become young adults become mothers. That's why Disney re-releases their cartoons every 7 years. You got a new target audience. So you start thinking, what films in the past 8 years were stories for youth and families, mothers? And Dana and I would just start throwing out ideas. You know, Perks of Being a Wallflower, and we would start going through these ideas until we came up with 20 names, 20 titles, 15 to 20 titles in the past 8 years. And so what we did on Tom's, because it was action, adventure, and drama, was we said, okay, what are some of what we've got here? Now here is the campaign, the commercial we wrote for inauguration. And you can see where we took it right out. Off page 5, the setup, Morgan stands in a spotlighted lectern. On page 5, line, Morgan says this, yada, 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 yada. So we went through that and we said, okay, this is action, adventure, and drama. And we came up with 20 films that fit action, adventure, drama, and the audience. And then we watched the commercial for all 20 of those films and did the same thing on the audience analysis. Every time there was romance, every time there was action, adventure, every time there was drama, every time there was sex, every time there was science fiction, fantasy, every time there was yada, 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 yada. And then we went through the culture. And we compared those side numbers, and the pictures that we came up, you can see, drama 59, romance 11, action 28. So our target is men and women, and it was men and women 25 to 40. So out of all the 20 films that we did that audience analysis on, The 5 films that most matched our beat numbers were Jack Ryan, Shadow Recruit, London Has Fallen, Snowden, Olympus Has Fallen, and Arrival. And we said, okay, so now we need to find out how did they market those films to their target audience? Because the theory being, if we market our films to the target audience the way they did, we stand to make a similar profit. So we look and we say, okay, how many screens did it open in? What was its rating? How much money did it make in the U.S. box office? How much money did it make in the international? What studio released it? Were the directors A-list or B-list? Were the cast A-list or B-list? What was the budget? How long was it? When was it released? And we compare all those and we go, okay, so our rating for U.S. release average was $73 million. Well, our budget is $40 million. How much do you spend on P&A? Approximately 2/3 of your budget. So then you have to factor that into your profit. So you start looking at that. International, the average was $84 million. You add them together, and the average box office profit off those films was $154 million. I need $40 million to pay for the film. Is that a good ROI if I go to a bank with the collateral that I'll gain? All right, so then Paramount or other. And we hope to sign Kenneth Branagh to be the bad guy because he loves to direct himself. The bad guy's a great role, okay? So your cast, your tagline. The average cost of the films that were there was $60 million. Ours is a $40 million budget. How low was the rating? And it looks like winter. Isn't that interesting? January to March. Prior to The Matrix, nobody wanted winter. Matrix was the first hit in winter. So now we begin to see we've got our target audience, we've got our genre, and we've got this. So then the next step is...
Real quick, can I
yes,
ask
sir.
a nitpicky question?
Sure.
How are you quantifying your beats within the scripts in order to plug them in?
It's kind of intuitive and it's completely subjective,
Okay.
which is why I would do it and Dana would do it.
Okay.
And then we'd come together and I'd go, I got 8 beats of romance, and she'd go, I got 12.
Okay.
Okay, so we'd watch it, and we'd do it again. This is what I consider a beat, this is what I consider a beat, this is what I consider a beat. And then we would tie it down. And we learned when we did those 20 films, we took the names off them and put numbers on them. And so when we would go back and look at the numbers, Nick, one of my assistants, had gone through and mixed them up. So we'd go, Nick, we need the numbers on number 5, number 7, number 13, number 14, number 8, and he'd come back with the names of and we'd go, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon? Really? Because then we'd start second-guessing ourselves. And we'd go in and we'd go, no, that's action-adventure. It might be, but we're looking at how they marketed it. And sometimes studios can do it wrong. Crimson Peak was marketed as a horror film because it was guy who did Pan's Labyrinth. Yeah, Guillermo del Toro. It was a gothic romance. So your horror audience went to see a horror film, and it was scary, it was good, but it wasn't horror, it was a gothic romance. But Universal said, oh, no, this is del Toro, it's all horror, so we got to market it horror. You can run into that with your distributor. They know everything. They know it all. So yeah.
Like you did it wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
500 Days of Summer was romantic comedy, and then it was more indie drama.
Yeah. So you're looking at how they marketed it, not what, ladies and gentlemen, not what you wrote. I'm sorry. So then the next thing we do is we have to look at the cost analysis of those films. Okay, again, we've got the U.S. box office. Now we're including, excuse me, I don't want to do this. Your P&A and your budget. All right, again, the budget was average 60, the P&A was average 55. You add that together, you get 100 and What do you get? Who's a mathematician?
115?
Yeah. Well, we already said that your beginning box office, which was just theatrical release, was 154. So we're still ahead of the curve. So we still know what we're doing there. And we know we can fudge the budget if we want to make it more than 40 million, because when you talk to your distributor, the bigger the budget, the more money they're going to buy the film for. They're going to pay for distribution for you for. Doesn't make any sense, but it does. Okay, so now here's where you start seeing your big money. Now you're going to do ancillary grosses, because every film has 4 distribution windows. My students, I can call them at 3 in the morning and give me the 4 windows, and they'll go, U.S. box office, VOD, home entertainment, television. Can I go back to sleep now? I mean, they can just rattle that off. But when you're talking to your distributor, you're talking to Universal or Paramount, not just for the theatrical release, but who do you stream with? What's our streaming schedule going to be? What is the net gross on that? What is the producer share on that? Okay, now let's look at home entertainment. All right, out of the home entertainment, what is the producer share? What is the net gross? Okay, now let's look at cable television syndication. How much is this? Because it's not until it reaches television that 70+% of your audience has now seen your film. Out of your target audience, 3 to 5% will see it in the movie theater. That's with 154 million. So you've got to have all 4 of your distribution windows in each one of your territories. So what you're looking for here, you got your gross box office, your DVD gross, your premium cable, your network gross, and then streaming gross. Then you've got the same with the foreign. All right, well now look at the numbers we're looking at. Jack Ryan Shadow Recruit, adjusting for 2018 when we said this, its gross was 944 million.
Pretty good.
Those are pretty good numbers. Oh, whoops, I'm sorry. I'm the major caregiver for my father. Okay, that wasn't my dad. I have to keep that up in case my dad calls me. I apologize.
I'm curious, are a lot of those numbers, like the videos on demand, streaming, and all that kind of stuff, are those numbers connected to how it's going to perform theatrically, or are those
not
completely separate?
usually. I mean, it's still in the same target audience.
Okay.
But my dad, bless his heart, has probably seen what's the one with Gru? Despicable Me. Despicable Me 2. He probably watches it at least once every freaking day.
Right. So he's like my kids.
Yeah. How many times has your kids or your grandkids seen Trolls 2? You can quote it. So that changes the numbers. It's still the same target audience, but those of us who love films will rewatch it again and again and again. And so now you're looking at the average adjusted gross over a span of 5 to 8 years, $907 million. I only need 40 million and another 40 million, 80 million to make and do P&A on the film. That's a pretty good return. So now what you have to figure out is, and this was the hardest form for us to create, the ancillary, to create the proprietary equations. And this form, I have to say, out of all of our forms, I'm so proud of, because you put in the picture budget and you put in your assumptions. How much, what percentage of it is going to be, how much money you're going to make in vendor profit equity, brand tie-in, if you've got bank gap, private equity, etc. You put those numbers in, and it automatically populates everything down to collateral sufficient. Is there sufficient loan proceeds and license advance to get the 40 million that we need? Yeah. That's the form the bank will use.
You can go to the bank with it.
This packet is what, with the collateral that we go to with it. This is what we sent to Tom and his agent. And he said he was going to send it on. Then you also do your producer share analysis, and it's the same thing. Yes, sir?
What is the collateral this time?
I'll talk about that in just a minute, okay? So, some of these numbers you can't find, but you can see where, sales agent's fee is 15%, so you can see where some foreign distribution fees 35%, so you can figure out certain percentages. So this is where we're looking at and we say, okay, we anticipate gross box office 73 million, and again, it populates all the way down here and it tells you what your producer's net is, how much we as the producer are going to make within the initial 2 years of its release, is just under 40 million. That's my share, not the bank's. That's what Thunder Media gets. Thunder Media's producer share is going to be 39 million. It's a 5-to-1 ratio of cost versus return. So it's a very, very good ratio. So now we put together this final report, and this is what we would send to Harvey, where we would say, okay, and we would write these target audience notes for Harvey, and excuse me, most of it was just bullshit, but it sounded really good. Okay. Harvey would read that and go, yeah, okay. This picture's campaign is exceptionally strong drama, action, and romance elements driving the 3 most powerful target audiences, adult men, women, and youth. Inauguration's current brand presence is powerfully valuable. It is universally high recognition among the target audience and is associated with mysterious excitement, exotic settings, and adventure. So your combined audience, your campaign elements, your studio culture. Harvey, do we get a green light on this script? Now, you have to understand a lot of this are assumptions, and a lot of this you're working out. We got handed Scream, and we couldn't do a green light analysis on it. We finished reading Scream and looked at each other and went, I don't get it. Do you get it? I don't get this film. Is this a horror? Is it a comedy? What is it? And we basically said, no, pass on Scream. Luckily, Harvey didn't listen to us. And we made a fortune on Scream 1 through 12, So, but our initial reaction doing the green light was we couldn't really do a full one, and it looked like we were going to lose money.
So did he do that as a write-off, like a loss?
Yeah, well, he had a feel for it, and who directed it? I can't see his name. I can't remember.
Raw. I'm going to pull that up.
Yeah, because it's going to bug me.
Yes.
So, he had a track record with the director and writer, and so he said, no, let's just chance it, and he never let us forget we passed on it. Yeah, well, remember you passed on Scream.
Wes Craven.
Yes, Wes, thank you. Fascinating
Wes
guy.
Craven?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he's
Absolutely.
His return back to horror after
a
long while.
He's the coolest guy. He's incredibly well-read. He's very erudite. He's the kind of guy you go to dinner and you want him to order the wine. He's just a phenomenal guy. He's really cool. So then what we would do in the package for our own enjoyment, although never everybody paid attention to this, was we would cast it. And we would then, say this is who we suggest. And so what we would include is we would include a description of the character and our top 3 choices. One of my students did this about 2 years ago, and I looked at him and said, this is an automatic A. This is absolutely brilliant. He added to his that individual, that actor or actress's cumulative box office numbers.
Nice.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh my gosh. If you did that on Tom, you'd be in the billions because he was part of the Marvel Universe, I looked at him and went, why didn't we think of that? That's absolutely brilliant. So we have all that. These are the women we're looking at for the wife, Rachel McAdams with all of her contact information, Amy Adams with all of her contact information, and Jennifer Garner.
The banks like these names.
Yeah, so do we. First black African-American female president, Viola, Angela Bassett, or Amy Wolford, who just did Wrinkle in Time. And then the bad guys, we're looking at Jeffrey Dean Morgan. He's more television, but he's got a huge following because of The Walking Dead and because of Supernatural. I loved him in Supernatural. And Ed Harris and Michael Keaton, who just recently won a Golden Globe a year or so ago. And then for the sidekick geek, we have these guys. Now, here's the thing that my students particularly look at me and go, you know, we can't afford that person. George Clooney. How much can George ask for a film?
15 to 20
20
million.
million. 15 to 20 million.
Yeah.
Do you know in the last 10 to 15 years, 9 out of 10 films he's done at day rate, and half of those he didn't even ask for points on because he loved the script.
They will do deals.
He will do, I mean, that's 9 out of 10 films he did at rate. You guys can afford George Clooney. The reason why Matthew McConaughey does those commercials for the alcohol on the vehicle is commercials, as you know, are mailbox money. It allows him to do films like The State of Jones and films he really wants to do because he's got mailbox money coming in off these commercials. And a lot of actors and actresses are catching on to that. So one of the things, Only Alien on the Planet, there's a father role, the boy's father is a key role. Very, very important role. We would probably need the actor for 4 to 5 shooting days. That's it. One of my students, because we also talk about all your ancillary markets. Can you turn this into a book? Can you merchandise or license? Can you, what's your soundtrack going to be? They wanted us to approach Toby Keith to play the father and to write a song for the soundtrack, which then opens up the entire country music market for us. So they're thinking outside the box. One of them suggested on another film a couple of years ago, and this was just as A Star Was Born hadn't been released, but the buzz on it was very positive. What if you got Lady Gaga to come in for 3 days, play this role, and be on the soundtrack? Okay, your audience just opened up. So I tell, when I was at Mystic Arts Pictures, when I was doing independent work, I remember my boss, Katie, looked at me on this. It was a really good script. It was a family script, and she looked at us right after the last Star Wars, and she said, "I want James Earl Jones to play this role." And I went, "Yeah, right." What was your budget again? Every girl needs a dream, Katie. And she said, "Get him on the phone." One thing I learned from Katie is never to be afraid of the phone. She'll call anybody. So we got James Earl Jones on the phone. She pitched him the idea. He liked the idea. He said, "Send a script." He called back 2 days later and he signed on at rate. And after that, every time he came into town, because he's based out of New York, we'd get a phone call, that really deep voice, "Is little Katie there?" "Yeah, James, just a minute." She's low, 5'2", nothing. And so, little Katie would be there. And we would do that, and he'd take us to lunch, and he'd catch up with us.
So
the one thing I learned was, never be afraid to ask. He says, "No, you're no worse off than you were when you began." He says, "Yes, you got George Clooney. And your market just opened up." I mean, when I was on a panel online when George was talking about some things and he said that, and I'd just been paying attention, but I popped in with a question, and I said, "Wait a minute, are you telling me," and I'd had his IMDb up, and I said, "You did this and this and this for rate?" And he goes, "Yeah, I love the script."
So between their big projects, they might do these little...
They'll do these little ones, and if 9 out of 10 he did at rate, now granted he's got plenty of money in the bank so he can afford to do that now, but that doesn't negate the fact that these big... Guys, what do you want to do? You want to write. You want to direct. You want to make films. What does an actor want to do? They want to act. They want to do something. And if they like it, they'll do it. If you have to negotiate points on the gross, who cares? You were going to anyway. You had a question, sir?
I had a conversation back in Georgia, my hometown, a couple of years ago. It said that, we had a film come in. We did a little small film. He has $8 million budget. Bruce Willis got $2 million of it. He was only there for a couple of days or whatever, but he did the film. So.
Yeah.
There's a marquee name.
And guys, in your budget, in your cash flow projection, and then your budget, the above the line isn't in the budget. Y'all knew that, right?
Where's that?
It's in development budget.
The producers?
Yeah. Well, it's in the money for the development, because you're getting a venture capitalist, or you're having somebody fund that portion of it. So you're taking their holding fee out of that, and then their fee is not considered part of the budget. And so what you've got is you've got your distributors paying for that.
I did not know that.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, and you know, distributors love names like George Clooney or Matthew McConaughey or any of those guys, because going back to your question, the collateral that you take to the bank. Now, with all of this research showing these assumptions that this is the kind of money that can be made on this script, I got to get the money. Well, we got our development funding off this number, and that was $2.5 million. And that's what we'll spend in that 18 to 24 months of development, is that $2.5 million. That paid Tom's holding fee, that will pay Ken's holding fee, that will do all that. That's where you buy the rights, the ancillary, et cetera, et cetera. But what you're doing, the collateral you're getting, is now, with these assumptions, you go to Universal or Buena Vista or whomever. In this instance, Paramount was the studio that seemed to do really well with these kind of scripts. We go to Paramount and we approach them and say, we've got a film that we are interested either in doing a negative pickup or a distribution-only contract. And then we pitch them and we send this information to them. And of course, any distributor, one of their first questions is, what's the budget? Higher budget, the more money you're going to get. And do you have anybody attached to it? Well, yes, this is who we've got attached to it. And so now let's negotiate. You're going to distribute for us U.S. box office, including VSOD, home entertainment, and television cable network. By the way, who do you distribute through in these 6 foreign territories? Do you have existing relationships there? Or do I have to go to AFM and touch on each one of those territories individually? Well, we can do these 2 territories. Okay, so you're distributing through so-and-so in England, in Great Britain. That does not include Australia and New Zealand. And so you're distributing through them. Who do they do? The VSOD. Who do they do? Home entertainment. And who do they do television and cable and syndication through? All right, now we've got those covered. So now I have to go to AFM, and it takes, they're not going to sign with you the first meeting. But by the time you get to within 6 months, you should have a distribution contract with them. And that distribution contract, based on assumptions, is valued at $84 million. So that contract I have with Universal or Paramount or Disney or whoever you have it with is assumed to be valued at $32 million, at whatever the box office was. All right, so now I'm going to go to AFM, and I'm going to meet with these other 5 territories. First thing they want to know, what's the budget? Next thing they want to know, do you have anybody attached to it? Okay, this is what I've got. Okay, great. Again, they're not going to sign with you, but now they're on your radio. And guys, it's counterintuitive, but the more films you have in development, the more films you have in the pipeline, the more they want to talk with you, because we're not just talking about distributing 1 film that's going to make me money. We're talking about 4. And it's all going to even out. Maybe this does really well, maybe this is okay, maybe this is moderately, maybe this bombs, but it's all going to even out, and we're going to make consistent money. So you meet with those territories, and you get pre-sale agreements with the 6 foreign territories, 2 through Paramount, 4 on your own that you manage through AFM. And they're valued at $84 million because, or whatever the foreign box office was. So the assumption on that paper is that pre-sale is collateral worth $84 million. Now, if we look at a 5 to 8 year span, we're looking at this amount. Now you have the director attached to it. You have his contract. You have your lead actors attached to it. You have his contract. We've been talking to Doubleday Books. They want to turn this into a novel. We have that contract valued at this. Oh, by the way, we can turn this into a game or whatever. We're doing this. We have that count. Our contracts together have an assumed value of over $100 million. That's the collateral that you take to the bank, and there's 5 banks who have entertainment divisions that fund films like this. You've got your completion bond. Any film over $2 million has to have a bond. You have your E&O insurance. You have your production insurance. You have, when the students have to put all this together, this is their final for producing 2. Their bank package is 2 5-inch binders. I get permission from the department chair so they can photocopy and print out in there, because it's not fair to ask students to pay for that, you know. And then they come to me, the bank, and they ask me to fund their film. On this film, we had a 5-to-1 ratio. Our collateral is more than sufficient for a $40 million loan. The return on investment is 5-to-1. Banks are in business to make money. Do you know one bank that's going to look at that and go, no? And I didn't have to top out my credit cards, and I didn't have to mortgage the house, and I didn't have to beg money from mom and dad. And I haven't even gone into pre-production yet, but all of my distribution worldwide, all 4 windows, is already contractually in place. So I can enjoy making the film because I'm not spending the time going, yeah, but how the hell are we going to get any money back on that? Now, you have the E&O and you have the completion bond because, and you have something.
Because things go wrong.
Okay, E&O is
Errors and omissions.
Errors and omissions. It really prevents libel. It prevents somebody coming in and going, that's my story.
Okay.
You know, and stuff like that. So you have to, anybody over $2 million, they want that. So you have those, and then what, I had a point.
Completion bond is to
bond.
make sure that it gets...
You're going to end by such and such a date on such and such a budget. Now, every one of those contracts has a clause in there called force majeure. How's it?
And that's weather.
Yeah, it's God-related
God-related
incident.
stuff to get it out of your control.
It's completely out of your control. And going to that completion bond, too many producers look at a completion agent and a completion bond as the enemy. The thing you want to remember about the two insurance companies that do completion bonds, they know more about the film industry than you will ever know. And so when they look at you and go, no, we're not going to bond that because we're not going to bond a film being filmed in the Bahamas in August, when you scouted it in January and everything was just fine. You know, no, we won't bond that. After Robert Downey Jr., after RDJ got out of prison, I did U.S. Marshals with him. Nobody would touch him with a 10-foot pole. The Marvel Universe didn't want him for Iron Man. He bugged him the hell out of him until they finally let him come in and test. But he was handed a script called The Singing Detective. Something Detective. And this is Singing Detective. And he knew this was an opportunity to relaunch his career. No completion bond company would bond him. Mel Gibson put up the bond for RDJ to create his career again.
Wow.
You cannot say anything bad about Mel Gibson in front of Robert. But they found a way around it. So when that completion bond company says, no, you can't do that film for that budget, oh, they know budgets more than you'll ever know, more than Movie Magic will ever know. And so you listen to them. You pay attention to what they have to say. And you follow what they have to say. They know more about the film industry than you will ever know, than every one of us collectively will know, because they have money riding on it. It's an insurance policy, and so you want that agent to be on your advisory board, and you want that agent to be one of your references. So this is why that completion bond becomes so vitally important. And so when you go to the bank, you have all of this collateral lined up that is assumed at this value. And, you know, if the completion bond goes, a good example, Gerard Butler. Jerry's a friend of mine. I did Dracula 2000 and 300 with him. He did a film that came out a year ago summer called Hunter Killer. It was one of those. And it's a great submarine action adventure. It's really a good film. The cast is phenomenal. The storyline is amazing. That script sat on his desk 10 years. He wanted to do that film so bad he could taste it. But he and his producing partner, having done a green light analysis, said, there isn't a target audience for this film right now. There isn't an audience for a submarine action adventure right now.
We had to wait 7 years for that.
So, yes. So what do? Do we make the budget less? Do we cast differently? Or do we hold? And 4 years ago, we did another green light analysis, and we said, yeah, comparatively speaking, you can now make money on this. The guy was dancing naked in the streets. He was so excited he could finally make his submarine movie. And it turned out to be a very, very good film. The Navy, we premiered it to the Navy at Annapolis and in Hawaii. They loved it. It was so accurate. He was so pleased.
Wow.
But he sat on that script for 10 years because the audience wasn't there.
What's the title on that?
It's Hunter Killer. And he did it in between London Has Fallen and Angel Has Fallen.
So if you had done the analysis 10 years ago, it would have been different.
Yeah.
Because of the environment.
Yeah, the fire in the
Now,
audience. Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
And that's why you want to keep in mind, and this is why when you do negotiate that contract with your distributor, particularly your U.S. distributor, who owns the royalties, who owns the copyright, or a percentage thereof? Because that's where the mailbox money comes in. Because every 7 years you have a new audience. 2 years ago, our ward had passes to the women's conference. And I got a phone call saying, Traci, do you want 2 of these passes up at the conference center? Well, I'm from LA. I never get to go to there. I always had to watch it on TV. Yeah, I want to go to the conference center and see it, So I went over to get the passes from the bishop's office, and his little 4-year-old daughter, who is cute as a little button, comes running out and she goes, I'm going to be a witch for Halloween. And I said, oh, are you going to be a good witch or a bad witch? And I got this totally blank look, and her mother went, she's never seen The Wizard of Oz. Who has never seen The Wizard of Oz? If you live on the moon, you've seen The Wizard of Oz. But it's a new audience. Every 7 years you have a new... That's why Disney re-releases their classic cartoons every 8 years. Because you have a new audience. Streaming has changed a lot of that, but prior to that, that was why they did it that way. Yes, sir, you had another question?
I'm in LA. I used to know a fellow who was a member of the church. He was one of those major completion bond companies. I can't remember his name. You know what I'm talking about?
I'm sorry, I don't. In fact, when I started teaching this, I have templates for my students to use for in producing 1 and 2. Midterm is they have to do a business plan to create a production company with its 3 levels, the production company, the development company, and then the producing. And the final is the PPM, the private placement memorandum, to get money for development. And then your midterm in producing 2 is to do a full green light analysis on a film. They all get a script from me, and everybody uses the same script. And then your final in producing 2 is your bank package. The one template I could not get was from the completion bond. I called both completion bond companies, thinking, why didn't I keep some of these, I came up here never expecting to touch film again. And, we can, it's $600. Well, the digital media was not going to shell out $600 for a template for an insurance policy. But during COVID, I had this outstanding student, Rush Wilson. Rush called both completion bonds and said, I'm a student, I'm doing this, can I get a copy of your... They sent him the entire package, which he then forwarded to me. They didn't tell him he couldn't. And so we have that template now. But they said, my gosh, what are you being taught? And Rush walked him through producing 1 and producing 2, and he was about to finish producing 2. And they said, do you realize you're being taught something that no other film school in the United States is being taught? He said, both companies said, if you do what she's telling you, you've got it. You've got it. The closest thing to what I teach is the MBA, MFA program at NYU Stearns, and they have 1 class in it.
Wow.
I've been in the business almost 50 years. I want to take your class.
Feel free. I actually did this at Utah's Women in Film a year ago, And I had 4 professional filmmakers take both classes last year. They just audited it. I divide the class into 8 to 10 students, into cohorts. And that's your production company. You create a production company and you carry it all the way through both classes. And by the way, when you finish the class, you've got a business plan. You're welcome. Instead of complaining about it, I did you a favor. And they were, yeah, exactly. They were their own production company because they were working. There was times I'd get an email from Josh saying, I'm gone the next 2 weeks, I'm doing this film. Okay, great, whatever. But they did all the work. They did all the work.
Nice.
My attitude was, audit the class, I don't care, as long as the UVU doesn't know. I never told anybody, yes sir.
So at the risk of sounding like I missed the whole point, and I hope I didn't, but what about the independent filmmaker that's looking at films that have much smaller budgets?
You can do this on documentaries, gentlemen. You can do this on $1 million budgets. You can do this on $5 million budgets. You can do this on $500,000 budgets. The thing is, in your comparison, the films you compare to, those first 20, 15 to 20, have to be in the same budget range and the same genre and target audience. And you're guesstimating on that when you're doing that. So if your budget is $1 million, do an analysis. You're just comparing it to other $1 million films.
What about access to banks?
Same. As long as they're making a profit, a bank is in business to make money. In fact, you're less of a risk than a $40 million film. As long as your collateral, the assumption of your collateral is sufficient to cover the loan, they're in business to make money. They want to make money. They don't care how they make it. Look at the last 10 years.
How do you come up with the estimates for the comparables on the
some of
on demand?
Some of it you can put. They're really stingy on it. They really are. Which is why on that producer share analysis, it says that estimate this at 35% of U.S. box office.
Okay.
Estimate this as at 12% of U.S. box office. It's a rule of thumb formula.
Well, then you probably have to find the independent level of films that are out, not the Jack Ryans, but the ones that are independent, and find out how they did it.
And how they did it. And that's why your comparison is the same within the budget and that.
For home entertainment?
Same. The producer share analysis, if you can't find it. Now, sometimes I had access to studios where, particularly when we started this, because the internet was brand new. That's how old I am. And so I was calling people at studios that were friends of mine. Susan at Fox, I need these numbers. Well, of course, the first question is, why?
Yeah.
Well, we're creating this and we're doing this. Can you send that to me? That's ended up with yeah. And so we did that. But I've got something like, when I teach this, the PowerPoint that I use at this point, I've got something like 3 slides with websites. You can find numbers at.
Well, the website, the numbers.
Yeah.
And a bunch of other numbers.
Yeah.
IMDb
IMDb Pro.
Has acquired Mojo.
Yeah, Mojo.
IMDb
Some of them you got to search for, and some of them when you can't find, you just use that rule of thumb formula. That's why they call them assumptions. And you have to make very clear to everybody you're talking to about money, these are assumptions. But that's how you get those numbers.
So you mentioned that John Lee started this work.
Yeah.
And John Lee was at BYU.
Yeah, that's where he started building it.
He was great. And I would not appreciate the film department at BYU because the faculty said it was naughty to teach students that they could actually work on feature film production.
I know.
John would trace them down to Hollywood and give them experience. Eventually, BYU mistreated
Well, his textbook, he's got a textbook called The Producer's Handbook, Edition 4.
How is what you've developed go beyond? Or
Yeah, it goes beyond.
What way would you say it's going?
Well, we created those 2, and he took the producer share analysis, but the other document that I said, this is cool, you put 40 million in and it comes out. We just got the numbers much more specific. we started including things like numbers of screens and stuff like that. The more, when you're dealing with a suit, you cannot have too many numbers. I mean, a business, a man, you know, your business connection.
Yeah, okay.
All they want to know is numbers. That's all they want to
Well, a
know.
lot of the studio executives are...
Our accountants.
Well, yeah, they're from Wharton Business School.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
from a film
They're
school.
being
No.
counters.
Yeah, they're bean counters. So you cannot have too many numbers for a suit. Yes, sir.
How does a trailer, if you shoot a trailer, help in the greenlighting process?
Well, that's your campaign. That's your commercial.
That is the commercial.
That's the commercial.
A 2-minute commercial.
Yeah.
Basically,
So
from
you
your
go.
script.
Yeah.
You can do a trailer, 'cause some filmmakers like
Well,
to do a trailer.
Yeah, a trailer up front. Yeah.
Does that help?
But what you were talking about was writing the trailer.
Writing a trailer.
Not necessarily
Yeah.
producing the whole thing.
Yeah, because what we were trying to determine was, studio-wise, are we actually going to make this film or not? And with Harvey, it was, okay, how much money am I going to make off the film? And so that's why one of the reasons why we focus so intensively on that.
You're still
So,
in the story.
you're still in the story phase, knowing that, and there were some films that as we started going through them, like when we got handed Spy Kids, number one, we had never done anything less than an R at Miramax in Dimension. This is PG. Totally different target audience. And so we did a green light, and Robert really liked it. This was great. He was going to go ahead, he wanted to make films, he had 2 kids, a little boy and a little girl, Jet, and I can't remember what her name was, that they could see a movie he'd made. I mean, he wasn't going to show them Desperado. He wasn't going to show them Once Upon a Time in Mexico. So that was why we created Spy Kids. But then when he cast Danny Trejo as the uncle, who had only done R-rated films, his background, he was in prison. He was in San Quentin for 15 years or whatever, I can't remember how long. He rewrote it to really develop that character. And it changed the script enough that we got to redo a green light analysis on it. So we
You let your students work off scripts though, right?
Yeah.
You have them write up a draft of a trailer for it.
Yeah, that's after the synopsis and logline and tagline, they've got to write that commercial. And they get these forms. I provide them these forms, and in producing 2, the midterm is, I'm the executive producer, I'm Harvey, you come to me and you present this green light analysis, and I determine whether I'm green lighting your film or not. So they have to do the full internal and external green light analysis. And so the internal green light analysis, I differentiate between that. That's something that you're doing at the beginning of development. A lot of it is just guessing. We're assuming this is an action-adventure and a drama. We're assuming this because we haven't done it in full. But based on that, these are the short numbers that we get. The external analysis is this whole everything. Doing it by yourself, on this one, my mom, as we were beginning to do the analysis on this, was diagnosed with cancer, and I took a 4-month leave of absence to go down. They have a ranch outside Kanab to take care of her. It took me those 4 months to do this analysis, to get all the numbers right, to get everything formulated right, to make sure I had every piece of information I needed. Now, when the students do it, they've got 2 months, but you're doing this form, you're doing this form, you're doing this form, you're doing this form, you're doing this form. Now, the drawback with that is you got to do yours first, because hers is based off yours, and hers is based off both of yours, and his is based off, So that's the drawback with that. But they can do that in a month and a half or 2 months because they're doing it as a group.
So for an internal green light, you have them perhaps work off of a treatment.
Yeah.
And do a trailer even for that.
Yeah. For that,
see whether you're going to go on.
Basically, it's not so much intense there. What we would do is we would say, okay, it's an action-adventure drama. This is the target audience of most action-adventure dramas. And these are who we're looking to attack. These are who we're looking at for director. This is who we're looking at for actor. How's that going to impact the box office? That's when Josh came up and went, and in his presentation had their cumulative box office. And I went, I have been doing this for 20 plus years and never thought of that. That is brilliant. We're adding that to it, So it's kind of hit and miss to get you started.
Not building a trailer.
Not building that. And so we would go from there. The external is the trailer, your beats off the trailer, your 20 films, all that. But to get your development money in your PPM, you've filled out the private placement memorandum. You've determined the budget you need for 3 years on this, or 2.5 years on the development on this is going to be, 1.5 million or 700,000 or whatever it is you come up with. And so your business plan for your development company is in there, your internal green light is in there, your suggested writers and directors and cast is in there with their money, with their numbers, so that when you're going to these investors, they can see the direction you're going. Because what the hardest thing my students have to understand is what you're doing in development versus what you're funding in production. And I always say, may I borrow your phone? I always say, okay, it's like Apple wants to create a new phone. Or Hainsworth Communications, I want to start Hainsworth Communications, and I want to create a whole new kind of smartphone. Okay, I need to first of all put together a business plan for the company and get the bank to fund the company. No bank will give you a business loan until you've been in business 3 to 5 years and you have a profit, but you can get a small personal loan to get that started. Now, I need money for the development of the idea of this phone. That's putting together the blueprints, that's putting together a couple of test models, that's everything you do before you begin actually manufacturing the phone. Now I have everything I need to prove to Apple that they want to take me on, or I go to the bank and the bank will fund my actually making physical phones. That's your development versus production.
But you're not going to the bank for the development?
No, because
Those are investors.
those are investors. And so, having done this, if I put it that way, because films, thank you so much. No problem. Films and the development process are so ephemeral, it's just an idea. Well, what am I doing in development? Well, you're getting all of this paperwork. Yes, paperwork is boring, but there's value to that paperwork that then becomes the collateral that funds the actual making of the film. So at no time are you mortgaging your house or maxing out your credit cards. Your aggregate is all invested in some other way. The bank's funding the company. Development is investors, they're funding the development. And then, the bank is funding the production. And that's why your production company has those 3 levels. The Walt Disney Company. Okay, under the Walt Disney Company, you've got Touchstone, you've got Pixar, you've got the Marvel Universe, you've got ESPN, you've got... All Touchstone does is develop the R-rated films. All Hollywood, and so all Pixar does is develop the Pixar films. As soon as we have the collateral, we go to the bank and we say, okay, we've got Thunder Media, we have, I can't remember what our development company is for the development of Inauguration, I can't remember what it was. But then when we start filming, we create another LLC that is just producing that film. All that company does is make that film, which frustrated the heck out of UVU when they went to hire me, because so many of the companies I worked for, can we contact them? I'd love it if you could, but they don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
They're gone.
They're gone. We made Mission to Mars under Red Horizon Productions, and as soon as we wrapped post, Red Horizon Productions went away. Now, you can still call Sam Mercer, who was the producer on it. I've got his contact, and he'll tell you how great I was. He better, or I'll kill him. But, those companies. So that's why your production company is structured that way through LLCs. Mm-hmm. How many of you saw Deadpool 2? Okay, it was R-rated. You shouldn't have seen it. It was really fun. But one of the actresses, one of the stunt women, was killed in the filming the film. It was a stunt that went wrong. Okay, what do you think her family's first idea was? Ka-chung, we live in a litigious society. Well, the trouble was, Paramount didn't own Deadpool. They weren't. That wasn't who was making the film. Marvel Universe wasn't making the film. Deadpool 2 Productions was making the film. And all of their money and assets were tied up into making the film. Yeah. So you can't sue Paramount, you can't sue Marvel Universe. They'll try. And that's why on feature films like that, you always have a budget line item that's buffer or overhead that's 10 to 15%. And you know in advance it's going to get spent. So you hide an additional 10 to 15% in the budget. Maybe $200,000 goes into props. Maybe this goes into transportation. Maybe this. Now the budget that I give the prop man doesn't include that hidden contingency. But the fact of the matter is, I've got 10 to 15% hidden in the budget that I can pull out and say, when we did Once Upon a Time in Mexico, we were filming about an hour out of Mexico City. These little towns had never seen a movie like this. They wanted to watch, Johnny Depp and Antonio Banderas. And a villager fell off a scaffolding about 60 feet. Well, before anybody could even say the word sue, the producer had pulled out enough money to cover the cost of hospitalization, therapy, and $150,000 in addition. That was hidden in that overage. Because all I had heard up to that point was, no, the budget's already spent, we don't have any money, no you can't. No, we don't have any money, the budget's already spent, no you can't. And then all of a sudden this happened, and out came almost $500,000, and I went, Ann, I thought we didn't have that in the budget. And that's when she said, oh, it's hidden. And I said, what? Yeah, and that's how she explained they had that hidden in the budget. That wasn't from that line item that said overage overhead or buffer. It was hidden in all these, and I went, brilliant! Oh my God!
That's why you're a producer!
Yeah. Yes, sir.
When you're looking at establishing a collateral for documentary,
Uh-huh.
there's a company I keep getting these from, Peter Hamilton, that is a company, he says he does all the research and everything.
Uh-huh.
It's charged like $200 or whatever. Are you familiar with that?
I've heard of them. Who's the documentarian who did country music and Civil War? Yeah, Ken Burns. His stuff is just phenomenal. He started out using them on Civil War. And if you've seen the Civil War documentary, the research on it is phenomenal. Now he's advanced enough within his production company. I think they did some of the research for him on Vietnam, but his company did the rest of it. And when he did country music, the history of country music, which came out just a couple months ago. If you haven't seen it, it's phenomenal. It's on Amazon. It is so... My first professional job was at the Opry. So I sat there watching it going, oh my gosh, this is... his research now is in-house, but he started out using them. And if you want to see the quality of the research, go back and watch Ken Burns' The Civil War. It was really phenomenal.
I heard that when you first got money, it was set up as a non-profit kind of thing.
Yeah.
And when you got so successful, it went off, made it off,
and went commercial, yeah. Because other than him and Michael Moore, don't get me started on him, you don't really have financially hugely successful documentarians.
That's a super-sized me guy.
Yeah, a friend of mine, Lillian Glass, who is one of the leading world's experts on body language, she did a documentary that she did on her mother. It's called Reinventing Rosalie. Her mother passed in January. She was a Holocaust survivor. She was 103 when she died. And at 100, Lillian looked at her and said, what do you still want to do? And her mother said, oh, I've wanted to do this. Her mother, until she died, was just, her mentally was there, physically was there. I've always wanted to do this and this and this and this and this. And she had compiled a book of her, Wisdom by Rosalie, I think it was, a book of all this advice her mother had given her whole life. And so she did a documentary based on that book, Reinventing Rosalie. And I think worldwide film festival, she ended up winning something like 75 plus awards. She did not fund it this way. She's now doing another one on the FBI and body language of interview process that we did the green light on, and she funded it this way, and she's about ready to go into editing.
You mentioned the banks, those 5 banks in your...
Yeah, it's not in here, but it's on my PowerPoint when I talk about the 5 banks. It's like
Chemical Bank.
Union Bank of California. I'd have to look it up, but there's 5 that they have dedicated film entertainment divisions, and they're really good to deal with because they understand film. You don't have to start from scratch like if you go to the UCCU Credit Union. And they're all worldwide banks.
Can we get your PowerPoint?
Yeah, let me, I just need to dig it up. I can't remember who, I can see it in my mind, but I can't read it. But yeah, there's 5 banks that you really want to deal with because they understand filmmaking. Yes, sir.
These pitch sessions that you talked about, they come in and pitch.
Yeah.
How long were they, and what would they have to bring to the pitch session?
Well, 9 out of 10 were your usual, you had 15 or 20 minutes.
Okay.
It was hell day. It was so uncomfortable. And they would start with, thank you, it was a real pleasure, thank you for coming. They would,
Thanks for coming.
they would start with, like I said, something like, this is Harry Potter meets Star Trek, and then they'd start telling you about the story, and 9 out of 10 of them went all over everything, and you still didn't know what the story was. They had never been prepped. If somebody came in and said, the log line, given me a 2-paragraph synopsis of the film, the target audience is this is your genre, and if you market it to that target audience in that genre, we estimate the budget being this, you stand to make this amount, we would option that right then and there. But we never heard that. I mean, the best ones were the log line, a synopsis, and it's this genre.
That's interesting, because I've been to pitch presentations where they're like, don't do their job. Just tell your story. Like, don't go in trying to find all that information.
But the trouble is...
You need to know that.
Yeah, and we are all, I don't care what anybody says, inherently lazy. If somebody does my work for me, you just became my new best friend.
How do you believe them, though?
Yeah, because, well, they don't do a green light, but if they came in and said, this is an action-adventure drama, we've always estimated that the budget on this would be $15 million, and similar films that were action drama that is this genre, this target audience, and that budget, accumulated box office on that can be as high as this. I would have been very impressed, and then I would have gone and done my research and gone actually the estimates under it.
Yeah, I was going to say, what does it benefit them to touch the numbers to try to greenlight the project?
Because if there's one thing you can spot immediately is a padded resume and an over-padded pitch.
Yeah.
Can
I ask, for those pitches, how many of them come in and pitch that are just pitching the idea that if you're interested in it, they then write it or get contracted to write it, or how many come in with a completed script?
At a studio, you got to have something in writing, even if it's a treatment. Have any of you seen the form letter that you get from a studio before they look at your script, before they even open it?
Form letter.
That submission form letter that basically, crucifies you and then says, it was a pleasure, bye. And you have to sign that. Even so, we would get scripts and it immediately goes to a script doctor and goes through 6 or 7 rewrites. By the time they're done, it doesn't resemble anything you gave, but you got a film made. You got a credit. And so there's that benefit to doing it that way. But you have to have at least a treatment. I mean, I asked Matt Damon one time, we were doing the Greenlight project at Miramax, and I said, is it true when you brought in, what was when he won the Oscar?
That was a great project, by the way.
Good Will Hunting? Is it true you were down to just enough money to buy a Happy Meal? That's the urban myth, And he went, yeah, actually, that's about what we had between the two of us. But he had a treatment and a half-written script. But it was such a great story. It all comes back to that great story. And so Harvey jumped on it and made their careers. And then they managed to ruin their lives for 10 or 12 years as it all went to their head, and then both of them Matt straightened out his life for the most part.
But Ben,
He's still having problems. But yeah, it's, you came in with a log line, a synopsis, a written treatment or a written script,
Right.
and some just basic, this is what it is and this is your target audience. We would have sat up and gone, wait, what did he just say? Because so many of them, you just knew you were going to get that awful wandering, and then, and by the way, and then the character does this.
slap your eyes and
Yeah,
back
I mean, you
over.
could just see everybody just shut out, you know. But you had to have an answer to those 4 questions.
Right. But I mean, you can go in with the answer to those questions, because what I found, we would, try to develop scripts, go and pitch them and talk to distributors and all these kind of things.
Yeah.
And really all they wanted was synopsis, log line,
treatment.
just really, basic treatment.
Because if you're doing it studio, you know they're going to rewrite it.
Right.
Distribution. The best deal with distribution is distribution only.
Right.
With a studio. You end up owning everything. All they're doing is acquiring it and distributing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to fund it through, if you do a negative pickup or an in-house, they pay for everything. You just get a credit.
Right.
Negative pickup, you get a split between who owns what and who has control of what and who's paying the DDEs and who's not and yada yada yada.
Right.
You know then that they're going to demand a certain amount of rewrites just because of E&O. The best deal you can do. What surprised me, I was talking to Keanu Reeves. The first John Wick was a negative pickup. Their budget was $7 million.
Oh.
Through Lionsgate. Then it did so surprisingly well. They did the second one. It was in-house. It was a co-produced. It was co-production in-house in his production. He and his partner's production company. And the budget on that was like $24 million. And then that did so well. The third one that came out this summer, was it this summer, last summer? It just blew the roof off. And before it was out of the theater, they had a commitment with Lionsgate to do the fourth.
Mm-hmm.
But
Are they
it started,
doing 4th and 5th back to back or something?
I don't know. I haven't, because he's been busy with Bill and Ted. So I don't know. I'm really curious to see what they do with it. I'm so mad at Winston. But why Winston did what he did. If you haven't seen them because they're rated R, you're very good Mormons. But
they're also very good
they're
films.
really good films, yeah.
Do we all have to get entertainment attorneys as filmmakers?
I would recommend you have an entertainment attorney on your advisory board, and you have an entertainment attorney on call. You can't afford to hire a good entertainment attorney in-house, but you need them for legalese is a whole different language. Shortest contract I ever dealt with was 72 pages. I think I understood 5 words. I had the most marvelous entertainment attorney who passed away from cancer last October, Kelly Crabb.
Yep.
He had the unmitigated gall to get sick. He was really great. There's another guy that we've approached, what's his name? I'm drawing a complete blank. Who's really, really good, that we're waiting to hear from. And his name is, in fact, he's written a really good book called The Biz. The Biz, B-I-Z. He is just phenomenal. And his name is, wait a minute.
I was going to bring that book for you, Robert. The movie business, or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Kelly Crabb's book.
Yeah, I used that book. And this guy's name is The Biz, Schuyler Moore, Schuyler, last name Moore, Moore, and his book, The Biz, and it's written completely from an entertainment attorney's point of view, is really phenomenal. I use his book as well,
And we've approached him to replace Kelly for us. And we're just waiting to hear from him. I'd trust him. But, you know, a really good entertainment attorney can charge $1,500 an hour.
Wow.
So you can't afford to have them in-house yet. Having one on your advisory board saves you a lot of money when you go to them for quick advice. But when you go to them to, I really need to look over this PPM and this, that I know I'm paying out the wazoo. But I have students that come to me and say, would it hurt for me to get a law degree and emphasis in entertainment law? And my response is absolutely not. Now it's 3 additional years, you gotta pass the LSAT and it's more debt, but it will pay off in the long run. In fact, I've got 2 students that are planning on doing that. One that's already in law school and Rush who's planning on doing it.
So they'll be producers.
Yeah, but they want to produce, but having that law degree and an emphasis in entertainment law will really benefit them.
Well, we're past 2,
You
but
might find interesting, his name is Ben Lakey. He interned with Kelly.
Did he?
And then arranged at BYU Law School for Kelly to come up and teach courses.
Yeah.
Ben Lakey has produced, and he does entertainment law
Oh,
stuff.
okay. Can somebody pass me a pen? I want to write that in. Oh, thank you.
Ben Lakey.
I'll give you
Lakey.
Lakey. I'll give you his phone number.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, Robert, we're past 2, so do we want to
Oh,
thank...
no, I'm sorry.
Where can we get onto your blog or PowerPoint or something?
Yeah, I was going to say, if you guys want to take a piece of paper and pass it around and put everybody's contact on there, I'll email it to you.
Okay.
Or we can email Robert. Can you email all our
Yeah, or you
emails?
can email Robert, and Robert knows my email, and he knows my cell phone, so you can do that.
I'll get it out to everybody.
Yeah.
We want to...
We have regarding the distribution deal and approaching distributors. With the document in hand here and all of that, are there some differences for what you would want to have for a distributor to make a decision compared to what a funder would make a decision?
For the distributor, that's why which studios distributed those films.
So
You're going to have a much better chance. Now, the script my class is working on now, and we've tied it into the production management class, is a Western. I can't wait to see their first pass on the budget to see what they forgot. And we were talking about that, Marcy and I. So, who's really strong in distributing action-adventure? Who's really strong at distributing romantic comedies? And that's one of the things you find in that green light analysis is, Sony is the best, studio to approach for romantic comedies. Okay, and do you know romantic comedies do not do good in France? Paris is the city of lights, it's the city of romance. Don't try to distribute a film in France if it's a romantic comedy. So, you learn things like that. It's the same, I talk to my students about the directors. Who are the lead directors on horror? Who are the lead directors on romantic comedies? Laura Ephraim died, so now you got to find another one. Who are your lead directors on these? Those who you want to approach. That's why we've got Ken Brana down as the director we want to approach for inauguration through Tom, who's a good friend of his. And he loves to play the bad guys, and he loves to direct himself.
And he loves to direct himself, yep.
So, and believe me, when you start talking to actors, even actors who are beginning, they know who they want to deal with. They know who they want to work with as a director. They even know who they want to work with as director of photography. The stage is down below. And they know it, so I'm looking at the students now going, who are you going to approach for a Western? Who are you going to approach to play these? And the script is called Abilene. It's Red River, John Wayne's Red River, all women.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Cool, It's a really, really good script. Phenomenal female legend.
Yeah.
So it's going to be really interesting to see what they come up with for that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, obviously the coronavirus has disrupted the distribution system completely.
Yeah.
What is the impact of that on
We're still finding that because it really disrupted the theatrical box office.
Yep.
And prior to that, there was already a lot of arguments over the awards. Do they have to be theatrical release to be qualified? I mean, I thought The Irishman was, it was freaking brilliant. It could have had 20 minutes cut out of it, but yeah, it was phenomenal. He couldn't get a studio to back. Martin Scorsese couldn't get a studio to back it. He went to Netflix and said, I'm looking at this budget because of the CGI, and Netflix said, you want more? So it has really changed things, and we're still seeing how it plays out. And I don't know what's going to happen. There's still films that you really want to see in the theater. I mean, you want to see Endgame in the theater before you see it at home on your, 60-inch screen television. It's just not the same.
I want to see Bond.
I know. So, there's things like that I don't think will ever change. But the reason Disney bought Fox was they needed their library. Disney didn't, believe it or not, have a large enough library to compete streaming. That's why they bought Fox. They got Fox's library. And so then they wanted to create Disney Plus. They wanted to create a Disney streaming, but they needed enough assets. So, you've got, it's changing things, and it's still changing. I mean, we start class with what's going on in the industry today. Everybody has to read the Daily Variety or the Hollywood Reporter every day, and they have to report to me what's going on. 9 out of 10 of what we're talking about, articles we're talking about, have to do with streaming.
Yeah, people aren't making money on theatrical releases.
Yeah. Well, it's very rare that any film that's not a tentpole makes back initially in the initial box office their ROI. That's why you've got those 4 windows. That's why we have to include streaming, home entertainment, and television.
It's all just advertisement.
Yeah, exactly.
And Disney.
And it becomes name recognition. I mean, on what was the Endgame and the one right before it? That was the war one. That was a $215 million film. They spent $30,000 on advertising. That's it. Because name recognition was already out there. Everybody was already waiting for it. So that can make a huge difference in the P&A. But it's really changing the game, and nobody knows what's going to happen. I mean, it used to be straight to video or straight to streaming.
Doesn't that affect some of the assumptions that you're making?
It will affect the box office, but it doesn't affect the assumptions, the numbers that you're getting on the ancillary markets. Because you are going to do streaming, you are going to do home entertainment, and that's why now every one of your major U.S. distributors has some form of streaming connection, whether it's their own or whether it's through Netflix or Hulu or Amazon, and they have those connections. That's why when you go in, you want to say, they're not going to look at you and say, now let's talk about streaming.
No.
They plan on streaming it, you can darn well bet. But you as the producer have to say, now let's talk about streaming. Now let's talk about home
entertainment. But isn't that going to increase competition in those market segments?
Yes and no. I mean, what happens on Hulu and Netflix and Amazon, every time I pull them up, new releases, new arrivals. Right. Most of them I've never heard of, but I look at it and go, that looks like a good story. Mark that to come back to. Mark that to come back to.
And you look at the who's in the cast.
Sometimes I do. A lot of times it's just story. If there's an actor or actress that I really like that I see attached to it, or a director I really like, yeah, I'm going to mark that to come back to it. But mostly I'm looking at the story. And there's a lot of, I saw one the other day that was a Mel Gibson film. I need to look it up to see if it was even released in box office. It was on Hulu. It was really quite good. I don't remember seeing it in the box office. I don't remember ever hearing of it. But, direct to used to be a real pejorative. That's really changed.
Was that the Gringo one?
No, it was Unbreakable or something like that. I can't remember. But it was next. It was really quite good.
Well, Traci, thank you so much.
So awesome. This has been so awesome. Thank you.